This conference will now be recorded.
Great. So I've already brought in a bunch of files here and made parts out of them. So that was, of course, in a previous webinar, so we're not going to go through that. And then over here, I've got some sheets set up. So that's one thing just want to review quickly is how you can make sheets, a few different ways of doing it. So here, of course, we're on our nesting tab. And on here, you've got this sheet create button here. So that's one way to put a sheet into here. You can click on this. And then down at the bottom, it's going to prompt you select objects. And then in the brackets here, it's standard sheet sizes. So if you just hit enter, it's going to bring up this box here of your standard sheet sizes where you've got whatever standard sheet sizes you put in there. And if you want to put something new in there, you can hit your plus key and plus button there and put in your X and Y dimensions. So that's one way to put in a sheet. So if I want to put in the 120 by 60 sheet, click on OK. And then this dialog box comes up here. So in here, you can specify things like collar width. So that would be as close to the edge of the sheet as you're going to allow parts to be nested. Option here for clamp zones where you can basically have additional dead space at the end of the sheet, where if you're going to put some more clamps, you can give yourself some extra room there. Show name if you want to see this name on the sheet, the size of the text and such, that'll be on there. So this is your basic dialog box. I'll just click this use clamp zones box for now. So click on that and put this in here. And then you basically put it on your screen here, the orientation that you're going to have your sheet on your table. So if you're going to cut it that way on your table, you just left click, or you just rotate your mouse until you get it in the orientation that you want, left click, and there's your sheet. Now for the clamp zones, if you go into your machine settings, click on the little machine, and it's a little bit hidden. It's just on this first page here, you scroll down, and then you've got this box here for use clamp zones. So you check this, and you can specify additional dead space that you want on your sheet, and you can do it on all four edges if you want. So if I check that box and put that in there, then this sheet will be updated, and you see this little colored area here indicating that that's a clamp zone on that sheet. So that's where that one is. So that one's a little bit obscure where that setting is. So that's one way to make a sheet. You can also draw a sheet. So you can come onto your CAD tab and you can use your rectangle command, and you can just plug in whatever you want for your X and Y dimensions for your rectangle, and that's a sheet. Now to actually make this a sheet, back on your Nest tab, you would click on the Create button again. And this time, instead of hitting Enter for standard sheets, we do the Select Objects option here. So you just click on this, hit Enter, and I'm not going to use clamp zones on this one. And now that's a sheet. You can also just draw some irregular sheets. So if you've got a remnant piece, you can use whatever command and draw what your remnant looks like. So if I've got a piece that's left over, looks something like, I'll use my trim command, trim this up here. I've got a piece of material looks like this. I can draw it. And then key thing here is you have to join this together, because if I try to make a sheet out of this right now, go back to my Nest tab and click on Create, prompts me to select objects, and I try to click on this, it's not going to let me select that because it's not a closed entity. So in order to do that, go back onto my CAD tab, use my join command, select that, hit enter, and then this always gets me, always prompts for tolerance 0, just hit enter, and then it gives you a message down here that one object created, one became closed. If I click on this, we'll see that whole thing is one entity now. So now if I go back to the Nest tab and go to create a sheet out of this, now I can make a sheet. So one thing to note is if you try to do something similar, let me back up here, and let's say I also had a circular cutout in here somewhere. So if I go and let's see, that's still joined together, so that's good. I go back onto my Nest tab and create again, select objects, going to select all this, hit enter. So we do have the collar width there, so that's the distance from the edge as close as it's going to get. click on OK. If we zoom in on this hole here, you'll see that there's no sort of boundary on that, so it could nest parts right up against the edge of that that hole there. So to avoid any issues of maybe getting parts actually cut into that hole there, what I would do is I would actually make that slightly larger. So use my offset command and make it 1/4 inch or however much bigger I want it to, whatever value I feel I'm going to be safe with that, and then make my sheet out of that. So that's something to keep note of if you try to make a sheet that's got a cutout in the middle of it. All right, so those are your different ways of making sheets. And on this Nest tab, you can create parts in here. So if you draw something, you can create a part in here. Part browser, if you nest something, you'll be able to use the part browser to see where the things are on the screen. Even if you haven't nested things, you can see where they are on the screen. So you can see a listing of the parts that are here, required quantity, how many have actually been nested, and information like that. So this is kind of helpful if you get a complex nest and you can click and see where the items are. This import tab allows you to import a drawing that might be open in another workspace in IGEMS. So since I'm doing 1/4 inch aluminum, let me just go to a different workspace here and quickly just make another part here, and I'll make it out of 1/4 inch aluminum. And we'll do it for 1/4 inch aluminum for those of us not in the US. All right, there we go. So create a part out of that. So then if I go back to my other screen here and go into my part browser, if I click onto this import tab, it should show me that part, and then I could import that into my drawing also, which quite a large part, so we're not going to do that one right now. But that's what that import tab is for, if you've ever wondered what that is for. And then the Nest module itself is made up of 2 modules. We usually quote them together, Nest Level 1 and Nest Level 2. Nest Level 1 is just a lot of basic semi-automatic nesting strategies, which, to be frank, I never use these because I've got Nest Level 2 and the auto is much more powerful. But if you were just looking to save a little bit of money, you can buy Nest Level 1 and get some simple single part nesting and circle nesting, things like that. And then Nest Level 2 is what I'll be focusing on here. And with this, then you can do multi-part nesting and nest parts within parts and do it on multiple sheets and multiple sizes and lots of things that you get when you go with the Nest Level 2. So here I've got a sheet, remnant sheet that we'll be nesting on, as well as a couple other fairly standard sheet sizes. So click on my auto button here. And I'll mention right now, you can either nest before or after you add your toolpath. If you've got a particular sequence that you want your cuts to go through on a part, then I would add my toolpath before nesting. If you don't care so much about the cut sequence with all the different parts, you can nest the parts and then add the toolpath later, and might be a slightly better toolpath when it comes to collision avoidance. So click on our auto button down here at the bottom, prompts me to select parts. So I'll just select all these, and then you hit enter and it prompts you to select sheets and obstacles. So we click our sheets here and hit enter, and brings us into this dialog box here. So on the left, we've got a window. It's got all of the different parts that we've selected, quantity column. You can go through and change things at this point. So if you decide you actually want 30 of these, you can come in here and change quantities. You can also specify whether a part is supposed to be a fill part, that is, whether it's only going to use it to fill up a portion of a sheet or an entire sheet. So let's take like, whatever, do this one here. So you'd say, all right, I definitely want 100 of these parts, but if you've got room, give me up to 200 of this part as a fill part. And we'll see how that can be used. So then on the Sheets tab, you've got the different sheets that I've selected. So you click on these and you can see the information as far as the what it looks like, sheet size and things like that. You can also add additional sheets when you're in here. So down at the bottom, you can either click on this plus button and it'll bring you back into the IGEMS screen. So if I wanted to add that to my list of available sheets, or you can click on this button here and it'll bring back the standard sheet size box and you can choose a sheet from in there. And we'll go with that. Let's see. And then as we're going through this material value over here, you can specify value for your sheets. And there's a setting in here where you can tell IGEMS to do the nesting either based on the optimization of material or by optimization of cost. So if we come into here, down here, you can optimize your nesting by material utilization or by value. So if you got a piece of material, you got it at a bargain basement price, you want to use that first, you can choose that or just optimize your material. Remove finished parts. By default, when you first install IGEMS, this box is usually checked. So I'll just do this nest here quick to show what that'll do for you. So if you leave that box checked, when it's done with its nesting, it's going to remove these original parts and basically lets you know that all those parts have been nested. So if I click on stop and OK, then those all go away because all the parts have been nested. I personally prefer to have those parts remain after the nesting is done, so I usually uncheck that box there. So let's see, which one did I change here? Let's see, this one here, we were saying 100 fill parts. Then you've got your other items that you can control on a part level. So you can control rotation, which really wouldn't make a lot of sense on a circular part. Let's do something like this one here. So if this one, because of grain direction, it's got to be a certain orientation on the sheet, you can tell it to do either no rotation or 180-degree rotation. There's also a priority field. So if there's a part that you want to get into the nest and get cut quicker, you can specify a priority. The color just helps you distinguish it on the sheet, whether you want to allow common cutting, whether you want to allow the part to be nested in holes and things like that. So lots of settings over here. And then machine settings tell it basically when it's doing the nesting to start your nesting in the whatever corner is the like the origin point of your machine, how it's going to work through the sheet. Automatic, it'll just find the best way to put them on there. If you want to work across the x-axis first and work up your sheet that way, or up the y-axis, and then corner will kind of tuck things into the other corner of the sheet. So I usually leave that to automatic. Multiplicity, I'll show you here in a bit. And then mirror, if you want to allow it to mirror parts, flip parts over for nesting. And then fillers after front line we'll also take a look at here. So I'm just going to go with these kind of standard settings for right now. Click on this. Actually, let me uncheck that box again there. All right, nest. All right, so it's going through different iterations here. So it's showing us that it's created 4 sheets. It's nested 821 out of the 914. It hasn't nested any of the fill parts, and then gives us information about our material utilization. And so you can kind of let this go for a couple minutes or so, depending on how many parts you have and such. And you can kind of see, obviously, see what it's doing here as far as putting parts within parts and spinning parts around. And so it does a real nice job of optimizing your material. Now, if I see that, oh, it hasn't nested all my parts yet, I can click on cancel. I can go back to my sheets tab. And again, I can add another sheet. So if I want to add this one into the mix and see what that's going to do for us. So we're up to 896 of those. You can change quantities. So say, all right, I've got, actually I don't have 2 of these in stock. I've actually got 10 of those in stock. And nest. And then it'll add additional sheets on there. So now we've nested all of our sheets. It's nested 100 of the fill parts. And then it's showing us now it's got 6 sheets going here. Now, a couple of things we can show you is if I click on cancel, and a couple of things I'm going to do here. First is take a look at this multiplicity. So multiplicity was off. Best thing to do is just turn this on and show you what it's going to do. So before it made 6 individual nests. with multiplicity turned on, what it'll try to do is make multiple nests that are the same, so that you don't have to load maybe 6 individual CNC files, but maybe you only have to load 5 or 4 or something and run one of the nests 2 or 3 times to get what you need. So in this case here, it's showing us we still got 6. Let's see, I did turn that on. So this one here, I think I'll have a nest later that'll show that a little bit better how that can work. But that's the idea with the multiplicity, is it'll make multiple sheets that are the same. So you might not get as good a material utilization, but it saves your operator from having to load multiple CNC files. The other setting that we can take a look at is the fillers after front lines. If I go back to that part that I had the fill parts on, which I believe was this one here, let me bump the fillers up to 500. So without the fillers after front line turned on, and I'll turn the multiplicity back off. So right now we're using 188 of the fill parts, so it's not starting a new sheet. And also, if it's only going to do a portion of a sheet, it's only going to do the fill parts up to the end of the parts that it's actually nested. So like on this sheet here, we're only using 124 of the fill parts, and it's not putting any of the fill parts up here because it sees that as being the edge of the maximum of the extent of the parts that we're actually needing. If I go back and turn that or check this fillers after front line on and do the nest again, then it will go ahead and fill up an entire sheet with the nest parts or with the fill parts. So now we're up to 191 of the fill parts, 223. All right, so this would have been like that other sheet that we were just looking at where we had the filler after front line turned off. So now it's filling up that entire sheet. Now we're using 203 of the fill parts. So that's that setting there. And then you can also choose to do common cutting, which I wouldn't say. I've got another example here. We'll show how the common cutting can work. This part, all these parts don't have a lot that would be great for common line cutting, so I've got one that's got larger parts, so we'll do some common line cutting on. So that would be single head nesting, and if once you're happy with the nest, go back here again, get a nest on here. So once you've got things kind of the way you want it, you can just click on stop and then click on OK, and it brings you back here. And now, since we haven't added our toolpath on these parts previously, I would just go back to my cam tab and click on my contour button, and I would just add my toolpath to all the different sheets here. Just work with one sheet at a time here. So now let's put our toolpath on there. When it goes to add the cut sequence for the parts on the sheet, it'll always start on the inside and work its way out. So once you've got your toolpath on here, on your process button, click on your order button to select your sheet and hit enter, and it'll go through and add your cut sequence on the sheet. So we go towards the other end of the sheet here. We'll see on these ones here, it's going to do that part on the inside and then outside, and it's always going to work from inside to outside on things like that. And as in our previous webinar, you can change the order that you want to work through your sheet. So if you want to work from right to left or something through the sheet, you can change your cut sequence, or you can do zigzag and things like that. So you can choose, all right, we'll start at the bottom right-hand corner and work vertically through the sheet here, and then that'll change your cut sequence accordingly. So that would be a single head nest. Do a similar nest with multi-heads. So let me change to a different machine here. So I've got this machine set up with 3 heads, and click on this button here, go into the machine settings just to show where this is. So under cutting tools, you can specify how many cutting heads you want. Automatic tool selection, IGEMS will basically telling it that your controller can automatically turn individual heads on and off versus the operator having to turn heads on and off. Whether you've got your heads are manually movable, where the operator is going to have to get up there and change head spacing, or whether you've got CNC controlled head spacing for that. And then a couple other settings down here related to how it's going to calculate the coordinates to the first head or such. So set this up with a 3-headed machine, and if we go back to our nesting and click on auto again, select these again, these sheets. All right, we'll just go with what we've got here, except now, since we've got a machine with multiple heads, we can check this multiple tools box and choose how many heads that I want to use. And then you can tell it to either work in constant mode, where it's going to use whatever head space, one specific head spacing. And if you click on this button here, it's going to look at the available distance on the sheet and set the head distance accordingly. So basically, it's looking at like the smallest sheet and determining what it can use there. So let me get rid of a couple of these sheets here, just so we use one sheet size. We'll just do 120 by 60 on these. So click on that. So then basically, it's looking at the 119-inch distance and dividing it by 3 to give us that number there. So this would be usually what you'd use if you did not have programmable head spacing and the operator has to get up there and change the head spacing. You probably want to set it to just one value and run with that. Or if you know you want to set it to a different number, you can of course put in a different number. And we'll just go with constant for right now. And so what it'll show us here is different colors for the colored parts would be head number 1, and then we're also going to have head 2 and head 3 in here. So of course head 1 ends there, and then head 2 is going to be this area here, and head 3 here. So that would be with the constant head spacing. If you do have the programmable head spacing, you can change this to dynamic. That box gets grayed out, and click on Nest again, and we'll see what it does now. Obviously, quite a few parts and iterations here that it's got to work with. So it's a good one. So you got this one little part here that's going to cut with head 1. So that's kind of interesting. And then it's got let's have a corresponding part there. So it's head 1, head 2, head 3, and then we've got another little head 1 part up here. So this is kind of a cool example. Let's see here. It's going to put a head 1 part over there. Let's go back to one of those other examples that it had there, just so we can show you something on that. So up in this little pull down, if you do see a prior version of a nest that you want to work with, you can just click on that and use that. So let's just stop this for right now. All right. And let's close this. So this part here right now would be head 1, and this part here right now could potentially be head 1. So there's a neat setting on, to account for that on the CAM tab when you go to your add your cut sequence on a sheet, and we select this, hit enter. It'll take a moment because of all the parts on here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it'll take a long time if I don't have a toolpath, sorry. Let me put a toolpath on here. All right, let's try that again. And I'll just go with, yeah. I'll just change that back to closest. All right, so when we look through our cut sequence here, we have this part that's being cut with head 1, which is that one right there. And then a whole bunch of parts being cut with heads 1, 2, and 3. And then somewhere else down here, we're going to have another part that's cut. So those ones are cut with heads 1 and 2, and that one is cut with head 1. And this zone detection box will look at where a part is on the sheet and determine whether it should really be cut with head 1, 2, or 3. And the way I've got my layout here, this is head 1, this is head 2, head 3. So if I check this zone detection box and then click on the zone detection button here, it's going to see this here, and it's going to change it to either head 2 or 3, and this one here probably definitely change to head 3. So click on zone detection, and then it'll go through and say, all right, okay, zone detection. And let's see, and then you can also do tool optimization, and that'll change your sequence as far as doing, all right, that one first with head 1, 1, and 1 and 2. So let me check to see what I messed up there. Sorry, this worked earlier, I swear. Let's see here. Let's change this. Let's change a little setting here. Lower right. I'm just going to change where I'm putting my 0 point on my sheet here. Zone detection. All right, so that's all right. So that's more like it. So that's going to be head 3. That's going to be head 3, and then this is going to be head 2 and 3 for the corresponding one. So zone detection will handle that, and then tool optimization. If you are doing it with manual head spacing, and you are changing the number of heads that you're working with tool optimization, it'll put all the same head configurations together in the cut sequence. So the operator has a minimum number of times that he has to get up there and manually change that head spacing. So that's most of those settings that we see in the in there. So we talked about multiple tools and common cuts, and yes, so show you a little bit on the nesting with common line cutting. So let me just go to a different workspace here. And it's a little bit of a bonus feature here. I'm going to just show you a brief overview of the organizer module. Organizer allows you to basically import a bunch of files from via a CSV or text delimited file. So for people that are doing a lot of high volume nesting and they're working off of a MRP or ERP system, you can basically create a CSV file and work off of that. So let me just bring up an example of what our CSV file is going to look like. So in here, we've told it things like part number, where the file's located, the material, thickness, quantity, due dates. This can be like a job number if you want to reference that, quality levels, things like that, whether it's water only or abrasive. So this might be how a typical CSV file looks. And then you can import that through the, and with the organizer module, be able to nest those type things. So we've written some apps to automatically import from a CSV file. So I'll just click on this little thing here. I'll probably do another webinar in a couple months that'll talk more about the organizer module. But basically, that's what I'm doing here, is just importing a bunch of DXF files quickly with their quantities and everything. So this will go through and look and see things like, does the file exist? Does the material exist in my database? So, you know, these ones here, it's all saying no problem found. So this one here failed because this material is not in my material database. There's a couple others down here that failed intentionally just to show, you know, can fail. This one here, material doesn't exist. This one here, the file didn't exist. So that's a little report that it runs. So now that we've imported those, if I go onto my into my organizer module, it'll show them all in here, and then you can do things like you can sort by materials and things like that. So if I want to nest all these foam parts, for example, I can click on Find and search for foam, and I can just go through and check all of those and click on Insert and put these into my workspace. They're a different color just to indicate that these came from the organizer module. All right, so that's all those files there. And because I'm going to do common line cutting, I'm definitely not going to add my toolpath now. So we'll just go on to our Nest tab here, click on Auto, select Parts, select all those, select Sheets and Obstacles. If I don't already have a sheet on the screen, I can just hit Enter and just go straight into the nesting area, and then I can add sheets on the Sheets tab. So I'll just put in a couple of 5x10 sheets in here. And let's see what settings over here that I've messed up. I guess we won't worry about that for right now. So we'll check this common cut line box, and it's going to use whatever tool diameter that I've got selected at the time. And actually, I want to switch to a water-only machine just because this is supposed to be foam. Okay, that's all good. All right, select those again. Enter sheets and 10 sheets. And on the parts tab, we're doing a common line cutting. So now the gap will be 0.010 of an inch because that's the size orifice I've told it that I'm using right now. And click on Nest. And so it'll go through and do those nests. And this one here shows a little bit better that multiplicity thing that I tried to show previously. So let me just go back, cancel. So if I turn multiplicity on and nest, so now it's going to make 3 identical nests there. So the operator will run that program 3 times, and then this once, and then that once. So once you've got, again, a layout that looks good to you, you can click on Stop. It's highlighting in red areas here where it might potentially be able to do common line cutting. And we'll click on Stop and click on OK. If you want to do something like a sheet cutoff at the end of the program, you can just manually draw in a line here. So turn on my ortho button and draw a line on here, and then later we can pick that to be sheet cutoff. And so now I'll go onto our Cam tab, Toolpath, and go down to Common. And we're going to do sheet-wise common cutting, and we'll set our minimum common cut line length to like 12 inches. And since it's water only, probably don't really need any lead-in length. And we'll go with medium and click on OK. So I talked about this one a bit in the last 2 seminars ago. So if you want to review these settings here, that's in the advanced topics in IGEMS. And so then we can select those sheets. And it'll go through and add my toolpath to those. Good. And really wouldn't really need those 2 sheets, so those could go away. So let me just undo that here. Just have to remember to run that program 3 times. So let's just do the sheet down here for right now. All right. So then on those cuts there, we've got the common cut, the 1 cut to go down the middle. This sheet up here, if we want to add that remnant cut at the end, so I'll go back to Toolpath, Common, OK, pick that, do that. And then on the Sheet tab, you've got the option to, actually, sorry, I always forget where this one is. I should really do this more often. Here, Cutoff, under Toolpath, Cutoff, and then you can tell it, what speed you want to do the cutoff at, and or do a blind lead since we're starting off the edge of the material, and then you can just click on that, and that will be a cutoff on there. You can also do similar thing if that was you're going across a big ring or something. So if I move this over a little bit, just to demonstrate that. So if I move this to, let's say, there, that's where I want my common cut for whatever reason. Let's see if I can do this move correctly here. Move that from there over to, let's say, right about there. All right. So back to Toolpath and Cutoff. Shortest cut is basically how close it's going to, smallest cut that it's going to do, and then how close it's going to get to a part based on the material that you're doing. So click on this now. And then if we zoom in here, you'll see it stops a little bit before the edge of that part there, so you don't potentially cut into the part. So that's one thing you can do there. And then the other thing you can do that's pretty cool is you can store remnants. So if I go up to this sheet area here, and I go down and I can basically lock the sheet. So click on lock and do that, and it'll go through and basically see where we did cuts on the sheet, and then you can inventory this and save it for later. So then what you would do is you'd go back to sheet and you can export the sheet, and we're going to export this, and we'll pop it in here. We don't need all that for our different file names that are on there, but so now this has made a new file, and it's called this foam standard 1-inch, and basically you can come back and pull sheets out of this in the future. So month or whatever later, you're doing some nesting on some 1-inch foam, you can basically go in and pull this from inventory. So let me just close this, and let's just say, all right, here we are a month later, we want to nest these parts out of some 1-inch foam, so I want to see what I've got available. I can go back up to sheet, and if you click on open, it's going to open up that file because it knows that I'm working with foam 1-inch, and so just automatically open up that file, and I've got it there, and then I can just cut it, control exit from here, and bring it into my my other workspace and just paste it in there, and then put in some other sheets depending on what I need. So that's how the whole export and import works for sheet inventory. So I've pretty much reached the end of what I want to cover this month on the nesting. Certainly, as usual, if anybody has any questions, you can type those in, or can email me or call me later. I guess I didn't really talk about the reports. There's the report generation, so you can click on a sheet and get information as far as parts that are on the sheet, things like that. Of course, all these different reports can be customized, so it shows you image of the sheet, sheet size, how many parts are on each sheet, things like that. So with that being said, I hope you've all, again, enjoyed this, and hopefully found a tidbit or two of information, then it's well worth it. So appreciate your time, and hope to see you next month.